I'm from Auckland, born and bred. A Jaffa, I'm afraid.
How do I identify? I guess I identify as a lesbian. Yeah, I identify as a lesbian, but I usually use the word gay.
My name's Joni, I'm 18 years old.
My name's Aaron Chang, and I use male pronouns.
I identify as a genderqueer pansexual person who's somewhere on the fluid spectrum of both sexuality and gender identity.
I identify as takatapu.
I didn't even realise I was gay until I finished high school.
So how I identify is as a woman.
I do drag, and my drag name is Dakota Vegas.
I refer myself as a male to female transgender woman.
That's a very tricky question. Something that changes from day to day, or moment to moment some of the time.
I've always known from a young age, probably the earliest memory I can remember was probably when I was 4. Everyone would be getting ready for church and they would forget about little old me running around. And then I'd run in and grab my mum's bra, put it on, grab her church hat, walk out on her high heels and be like, hooray! Yeah, primary school was really fun. I would always like sneak my sister's clothes out of the window. I think I was really smart as a kid. I would have like 2 different identities. There'll be like the moy at home, the quiet kid, and then there'll be like the loud kid in primary school. They would beg the teacher if I was good the whole day, if I got to perform in front of the class, if I did all my work. And a lot of the kids would be complaining, oh, not another performance from Moy. Ooh, high school. That's when I realized that I was different. And I kind of was in denial for a good 3 years. I went through trying to act like Tupac when I was 13, trying to prove to my brothers that I was straight. So I'll be like blasting like all of Tupac's music really loud out of my room. Be walking out of my room like with baggy clothes. I'm like, yeah, I like girls. And then I'll pretend I'll be talking on the phone with a girl when there was no one. And I'll be like, yeah, baby, I love you. Da, da, da. But yeah, there was really like no one, how do I put this? There was no other fuffers in school. So yeah, I went to a school that was basically like sports orientated. Yeah, they only accepted me because they thought I could play rugby like my brothers.
So for myself personally, I think gender is totally limitless. Like gender is something that you can choose what you want to be. Like if you're a man and you feel like you're a woman's trapped inside a man's body, you know, like you should express that and you should learn to be yourself and be happy with yourself, because you only get one chance at life, and life is too precious to just have something so negative holding you down.
I come from, a family where I've got a really strong mama who was always like, don't let anyone tell you you can't do something because of your gender. So I feel like I grew up with this very feisty sense of self and this feisty way of embodying my gender in the world. But yeah, through high school, all of a sudden, I had to learn all of these expectations. No, good girls do this and respectable young women do this. That was really confusing for me. We grow up with these expectations of what it is to be masculine or what it is to be feminine. But so sadly, often those also get assigned to being a man or being a woman. You can be a masculine woman or a feminine man or somewhere in the middle on all of those spectrums, and all of those identities are valid. Yeah.
For me, it was very immediate, actually. It was very immediate, realising that I had feelings for men, that I was attracted to men. Funnily enough, it happened while watching the remake of The Italian Job. And this is a true story, I promise. And I was watching the movie in the cinema with my father, and I was watching, I think it was Charlize Theron, I think was in that movie. Can't remember the male in it. But they were kissing, and I asked myself, which of them would I rather be? I'm very analytical, so that was my way of thinking it through. I was like, it suddenly dawned on me that which of them would I rather be? And I realized I'd rather be her. I'd rather look like him, but I'd rather be her. So I was looking at a heterosexual couple on screen, an attractive heterosexual couple, and it suddenly occurred to me that I didn't really want to be the guy. I would actually rather be in place, if you like, of the girl. It definitely hit me like a ton of bricks. It was devastating, actually. And that word flashed into my head, you're gay.
When I first started to think about my sexuality and what words or what identity categories would work for me, I started to feel quite anxious, isn't the right word, but my chest felt tight, and I felt this kind of sense of uneasiness. I thought of myself as quite an open and accepting person. I had friends who were out as queer and gender diverse, but all of a sudden that changed when it was about me, and all of a sudden I realised that maybe I had some internalized, I don't know if it's homophobia or transphobia, but I had this kind of sense of, there was an uneasiness kind of developing inside me as I started to realise that I kind of didn't fit the boxes that I thought I was in.
I think my understanding of gender and sex is that sex is a biological thing. It's often a thing between your legs, I guess, in terms of you're born with male parts or female parts or both. Because I now understand that you can have both, and not a lot of people understand that either, which is kind of a whole other story. That's my understanding of sex now. It's kind of the way you're born, and it's not necessarily the way you become or the way you want to be. Whereas gender, it's more of a socialized thing. It's either the way you see yourself or the way the world sees you. And often, or sometimes, they don't necessarily match. People think it's a choice to choose your gender. And sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. I feel that a lot of people are forced into choosing something that's not necessarily right for them. And I think that's the hard thing about society these days is you're socialised to fit within the binary, even if you don't believe that that's what you are.
Growing up, I thought that gender and sex were the same thing. I thought that it was about being a man, being a woman. I've since come to realise that it's slightly more complicated than that. Your sex is about your physicality, the body that you're born with, and even that has some variation with like people who are intersex and that. But your gender is how you identify internally, and for most people, their gender is the same as their sex. But for some other people, it's different. So I identify as masculine, I identify as a man. I have friends who identify as neither or both, and in between. There's just a lot of variation on that.
There is a lot of invisibility around certain parts of being intersex. So what typically defines being intersex as far as the wider community and society is concerned is there is only one image of what an intersex person is. Often that person is called hermaphrodite. The idea that they have both genitals of both female and male. However, intersex is so much more complicated than that, and there's hundreds of definitions of what an intersex person can physically be. Intersex is a very complex genetic definition of a person because there is what we typify as being the masculine body or the male body and the female body. But genetics aren't so simple, and sometimes they can get mixed up. And that can either start in the womb or that can start during puberty. And how that reflects on the person growing up is it will come out more. For example, I'm an intersex person. I don't have an Adam's apple. I have a female's bone structure. Somebody looking at my skeleton in a couple of 100 years would say that's a very tall woman, whereas If you looked at me when I was 16, you would say that's a very tall boy. That's how wide being intersex can be. It doesn't necessarily have to start just with the genitalia. The hermaphrodite is not the only form of intersex. You're taught in health class a certain way that puberty ought to go. You're taught in health class that there is a certain body that you can expect, and it's the same for both ends of the gender spectrum, both males and females. They're expected to go a certain way, and where that's difficult for a intersex child is that when they don't start growing hair where they should or when they should, or that they are they would define themselves as male and they start growing breasts, or they, like myself, don't have a Adam's apple and it never came through.
So when I think about identity, I think growing up I sort of understood the different boxes that we put ourselves in to be so solid and so fixed. And then as I've kind of grown up and through my teenage years, I sort of started to understand identity as this more fluid concept, that there were sort of more shades of grey around, well, what is gender and what is sexuality, what is attraction, and what do you do when they don't kind of fit totally in one of those one or other kind of boxes. So when I kind of learned that there could be a space in between and that space was totally valid, it was a really life-changing moment for me, because I thought, wow, I can be and I exist, and that's totally cool, and there was a lot of freedom in that for me.
I think society is very particular about masculinity and femininity, and that can really just be hard for a young person, or actually for anyone, to deal with.
The biggest enemy was me, really. I was the one that made it the hardest for myself. And I mean, they say you are your worst critic and you are your biggest enemy, but I just made it so much harder for myself.
It's not about being exactly the same, but it's about having exactly the same level of respect around our lives and our relationships.
I think our society has a really binary way of looking at gender, in the way that if a woman is seen to be a powerful, strong person, they're identified as such. They're not spoken as of just, this is so-and-so, she's a female. It's like, this is so-and-so, she's a businesswoman, or she's a power femme. Whereas with it, when a male is all those things, it's just sort of accepted, and vice versa. When a male is sort of more feminine, that's not part of a masculine identity. So they're talked about in a way that's like, oh, he's a sissy, or oh, he's a homo, or sort of effeminate ways of being. And I think I have so much to say about this question, because it's really marred my life a lot. It's been such a huge struggle for me. I think even more so than coming out was being able to say I can still identify as female and walk in the world in a kind of masculine way that I do,